It was supposed to be a routine morning interview. Interview Meghan Markle appearing on Good Morning America to discuss her latest philanthropic initiative and share updates on her media ventures. Seated opposite George Stephanopoulos, the Duchess of Sussex appeared poised and polished, her smile calm under the bright studio lights. George, known for his journalistic precision and calm demeanor, opened with softball questions, charity efforts, motherhood, and Meghan's growing influence. In media, the tone was cordial until it wasn't. When George shifted to more substantive topics, particularly her recent documentary's portrayal of the British royal family, the atmosphere changed. "Some critics say your story keeps evolving," George said, glancing briefly at his notes. "How do you respond to claims that you're reframing the past to suit your present narrative?" Meghan's eyes narrowed slightly. "I think it's dangerous when people expect trauma to be delivered in a neat, consistent package," she responded. But George wasn't finished. "Or is it dangerous when public figures avoid accountability by controlling their own platforms?" The words hung heavy in the air. Meghan paused. The smile faded. What began as an interview now felt like a cross-examination. Meghan tried to redirect. She emphasized her mission to uplift marginalized voices, mentioning recent grants her foundation had awarded, but George didn't let up. "There's a difference between advocating for the unheard and silencing critics," he said. "How do you reconcile that with your ongoing legal actions against several media outlets?" Meghan's tone hardened. "Holding the media accountable isn't silencing, it's protecting truth." But George countered swiftly, "Is it truth, or is it control?" The exchange jolted the studio. Meghan was visibly tense but composed, while George remained unshaken, his voice sharp yet calm. Social media erupted in real time. Viewers were stunned to see a GMA segment go from diplomacy to dismantling in a matter of minutes. Stephanopoulos was trending within moments, praised by some for finally asking real questions, while others criticized the segment as an ambush. No one could deny what they were seeing. A high-stakes battle of narrative, playing out live between a practiced journalist and a woman who had long demanded to tell her story on her terms. The interview continued, but the damage or revelation, depending on who you asked, had already been done. Meghan's responses grew more clipped. George, sensing the shift, didn't relent. "Some people feel they can't criticize you without being labeled as racist or sexist," he said. "Do you think you've created an environment where dissent is automatically equated with hate?" Meghan blinked, clearly struck by the framing. "I think we live in a world where women of color, especially outspoken ones, are held to impossible standards," she replied. "If people are uncomfortable, that says more about their expectations than my voice." Tension was now undeniable. Off-camera producers reportedly debated cutting the segment short, but Meghan didn't walk out. She remained in the chair, back straight, expression resolute. The segment ended with tight smiles and a quick handshake, but the internet had already seized on every glance, every raised brow. Within an hour, the interview was clipped, captioned, and circulating across platforms, with headlines screaming everything from Meghan exposed to George oversteps. Everyone had an opinion. No one had a neutral stance. By the next morning, the fallout was in full force. Meghan's supporters labeled the interview a public takedown masked as journalism, accusing Stephanopoulos of veiled bias and targeted aggression. "That wasn't an interview," one tweet read. "That was an ambush." Meanwhile, George's defenders praised his composure and courage. He asked what no one else has dared to ask, one op-ed declared. Behind the scenes, GMA executives held emergency meetings to navigate the media storm. Meghan's team reportedly declined further comment, but let slip that the Duchess had not been briefed in advance about the harder-edged questions. GMA, for its part, stood by the interview, calling it a journalistic conversation of substance. Still, the network quietly shelved plans for future segments involving the Duchess, citing the need for creative reevaluation. But for Meghan, the bigger issue wasn't the questions, it was how easily a platform she once saw as neutral had turned adversarial. And for George, it was a reminder that no interview is without consequence. especially when one party walks in expecting reverence and gets resistance instead. Asterisk weeks later, Meghan reflected on the interview indirectly during a podcast appearance. She spoke about media institutions that pretend to support women's voices while simultaneously undermining them. Sometimes the most dangerous conversations are the ones wrapped in professionalism, she said. She didn't mention George by name, but the message was clear. Meanwhile, George remained characteristically silent, declining interview requests and allowing the segment to speak for itself. Analysts called the clash a turning point, not just for Meghan's media strategy, but for morning news in general. GMA, long considered a comfortable landing spot for celebrities, had crossed into harder territory, and audiences noticed. The exchange became a reference point for how modern interviews straddled the line between promotion and accountability. And while the moment divided viewers, it united one truth. Both Meghan Markle and George Stephanopoulos walked away with their reputations altered. One was no longer seen as untouchable, the other no longer seen as impartial. And in a media age built on perception, that shift was seismic. Asterisk in the aftermath, both camps recalibrated. Meghan's team doubled down on carefully curated appearances, nothing unvetted. Future interviews were tightly controlled, often hosted on platforms she co-produced. The message was unmistakable. Control the format. Control the narrative. Meanwhile, George Stephanopoulos became an unexpected lightning rod in a way he hadn't been since his White House days. Supporters praised him as a journalist, someone who wasn't afraid to apply equal pressure to any guest, no matter their fame. Critics, however, accused him of weaponizing his platform against a woman whose very existence had become politicized. There's a difference between tough questions and tactical character assassination, wrote one columnist, while another praised his refusal to coddle celebrity sanctimony. At the heart of the controversy was a deeper, more complicated debate about media, bias, and power. Who gets to shape the story? Who gets to challenge it? And what happens when two high-profile figures collide live without a script under the blinding lights of morning TV? The truth, as always, was somewhere in the gray. But what was clear undeniably was that this clash had redefined how both of them would be seen. Not just by fans or critics, but by an entire media ecosystem now forced to choose between comfort and confrontation. Asterisk, as time passed, the moment didn't fade, solidified into a cultural marker. College courses on media ethics began citing the interview as a case study. Podcasts dissected it frame by frame, pointing out the power dynamics, the unspoken biases, and the subtle triggers buried beneath civil tones. Meghan, though mostly silent, became more symbolic than vocal, no longer just a duchess or media personality, but a lightning rod for discussions about race, gender, and autonomy in the spotlight. Her name evoked more than opinion. It evoked tribal allegiance. George, on the other hand, evolved into a kind of paradox, praised as principled by some, critiqued as performative by others. He had drawn a line during that interview, one that made future guests either respect or fear the GMA chair across from him. Quietly, producers adjusted strategies behind the scenes. Questions were vetted more carefully. Guests were more guarded. And yet viewers still tuned in, perhaps even more than before, to witness that razor-thin balance between conversation and confrontation. The Meghan interview hadn't been a one-off. It had been a glimpse into the shifting ground beneath public discourse. A rare moment where two powerful figures locked horns without flinching, and where every second that passed felt like a crack in the old, polished script of television's civility. Asterisk. What lingered long after the broadcast wasn't just the headlines or the viral clips. It was the feeling that something irreversible had occurred on that GMA set. For years, Meghan Markle had crafted her identity as someone reclaiming narrative power from institutions that misunderstood or mistreated her. And for years, George Stephanopoulos had served as the steady voice of reason in a shifting media landscape. But that morning, both personas cracked in real time. Usually composed, let flashes of frustration seep through her diplomacy. George, usually restrained, let his questions edge into confrontation. The public witnessed not just a disagreement, but a breakdown of the polite distance that usually separates interviewer from interviewee is. And in that collapse, something honest emerged. Unscripted, uncomfortable honesty. No PR team could fully undo it. No follow-up statement could reframe it. It became a moment immune to spin because it had already been claimed by too many competing narratives. For Meghan, the consequences were layered. Some doors closed. Others opened, but all now led to spaces that saw her differently. For George, the interview solidified his legacy as a journalist unafraid to press where it hurt Sivan if it fractured the image of neutrality. In the end, neither of them walked away unchanged. Neither did we. Asterisk.